"You burned it," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the crackling fire. "You burned my appointment." The Duke of Ashworth stood before the fireplace in his London study, watching the flames consume the letter he had just torn from his wife's hands. The expensive paper curled and blackened, the elegant script of the Royal Horticultural Society dissolving into ash. Behind him, Eleanor, his Duchess of precisely 6 months, stood frozen in the doorway, her face pale and her hands trembling. "You burned it," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the crackling fire. "You burned my appointment." The Duke did not turn around. His broad shoulders remained rigid beneath his perfectly tailored coat. "You are my wife, Eleanor. A Duchess of Ashworth does not work. She does not accept positions as if she were a common governess or a shop girl. Your place is here, managing this household, and eventually, raising my heirs." Eleanor felt something inside her chest crack. She had spent 3 years studying botany in secret, corresponding with the leading horticulturalists in England, submitting drawings and observations under a male pseudonym. The letter he had just destroyed was not merely a job offer. It was the culmination of years of quiet rebellion, a chance to contribute to something meaningful, to be seen as something more than a decorative piece in a duke's grand house. "I was not seeking employment," she said, her voice growing stronger, despite the tears threatening to spill. "I was invited to become a consultant for the Society's new botanical gardens, my work on rare ferns and medicinal plants." "Do not speak to me of ferns and plants." The Duke finally turned, and his gray eyes were cold as winter stone. "I married you because you were quiet, respectable, and came from a family that understood duty. I did not marry a bluestocking who dreams of digging in the dirt." The words hit her like physical blows. Eleanor had known from the moment of their arranged marriage that the Duke had not chosen her for love. He had chosen her because her family's financial ruin made her desperate, and his title needed a wife who would not cause scandal. But she had hoped, foolishly perhaps, that in time he might come to respect her. "I see," she said quietly. And then she did something that surprised them both. She walked past him, picked up the poker, and stirred the ashes of her destroyed letter. "You are right, Your Grace. A wife belongs in the kitchen." She turned and left the study without another word, and the Duke of Ashworth found himself staring at the closed door with an unfamiliar feeling twisting in his chest. The Duke's name was William Blackwood, and he had not smiled in 10 years. Not since the day his older brother, the Golden Child, had died in a riding accident, leaving William to inherit a dukedom he had never wanted and a legacy of debt he had never expected. The Blackwood estates were crumbling, the tenants were struggling, the bank accounts were nearly empty, and William had spent every moment of the past decade fighting to save what remained of his family's name. He had married Eleanor Hartwell because she was the only eligible lady whose family was desperate enough to accept a settlement that was, frankly, insulting for a duke's bride. Her father had lost everything in a shipping venture gone wrong. Her mother had died of a broken heart, or so the gossip went. Eleanor had come to him with nothing but a small trunk of clothing, a few books, and eyes that held more intelligence than William was comfortable seeing. He had expected her to be grateful. He had expected her to be quiet. He had not expected her to have ambitions, or opinions, or that infuriating way of looking at him as if she could see straight through his carefully constructed walls. Now, as he watched the ash settle in the grate, William felt something he had not felt in years: uncertainty. The Duchess of Ashworth did not retreat to her chambers to cry. Instead, Eleanor walked to the kitchens, where Mrs. Higgins, the head cook, was preparing the evening meal. The servants were surprised to see their mistress in their domain, but they knew better than to question the Duchess. Eleanor asked to borrow a sturdy apron and a sharp knife, and within an hour she had taken over the kitchen. She roasted the duck to perfection, seasoned with herbs she had grown herself in the small greenhouse she had secretly built behind the gardens. She prepared a sauce that made the footman weep with joy. She arranged the vegetables in a pattern that would have impressed the chef at Carlton House. And when the meal was served that evening, the Duke looked down at his plate with genuine confusion. "Where is Mrs. Higgins?" he asked. "I sent her home early," Eleanor replied sweetly, taking her seat at the opposite end of the long dining table. "I told her I would handle dinner tonight. After all, a wife belongs in the kitchen. I believe those were your exact words, were they not?" William's jaw tightened. He had not anticipated this. He had expected tears, or perhaps a cold silence, or at worst a complaint to his mother. He had not expected his Duchess to cook him dinner, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, all while maintaining a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. The meal was extraordinary. William had dined in palaces, in the homes of princes, at the finest restaurants in London. He had never tasted anything quite like this. The duck was tender and perfectly spiced. The vegetables were fresh and vibrant. The sauce was unlike anything he had ever experienced. He wanted to compliment her. He opened his mouth to speak. What came out was, "This is adequate, I suppose." Eleanor's smile did not falter. "I am so glad you approve, Your Grace. I shall ensure that every meal from now on meets your exacting standards." The next morning, the Duke woke to find that his wife had transformed the breakfast room. There were fresh flowers on every surface, arranged in ways he had never seen. There was a pot of something green and leafy on the windowsill that she claimed was a rare fern she had been cultivating. There was a stack of botanical drawings on the sideboard, detailed illustrations of plants that seemed to glow with life. "I thought you might enjoy seeing my work," Eleanor said pleasantly, pouring his tea. "Since I am no longer required to pursue my professional ambitions, I have decided to dedicate myself entirely to household matters. The house shall be my canvas, Your Grace. The garden shall be my laboratory. I do hope you do not mind the mess." William stared at the drawings. They were extraordinary. Each leaf seemed to have a personality. Each petal was rendered with the kind of patience and skill that could only come from years of practice. He remembered the letter he had burned, the invitation from the Royal Horticultural Society, and for the first time, he felt a pang of something that might have been regret. But he was the Duke of Ashworth. He did not apologize. He did not admit to being wrong. "Your place is in the household," he repeated, but his voice lacked its previous conviction. "Not in the dirt." "As you say, Your Grace," Eleanor replied, and she smiled that infuriating smile again. 2 weeks passed. The Duke's mother, the Dowager Duchess of Ashworth, arrived for a visit, and she was not pleased with what she found. The household was running with unprecedented efficiency. The food was exquisite. The gardens were suddenly the talk of the neighborhood. Neighbors had begun asking for cuttings of the mysterious flowers that had appeared in the Ashworth gardens. And Eleanor, the quiet wife William had chosen for her lack of ambition, was receiving callers from half the peerage, all of them desperate to see the celebrated new Duchess. "She has turned my house into a garden," the dowager complained to her son. "She has servants carrying plant cuttings through the corridors. She has transformed the conservatory into a greenhouse. People are saying she is a witch, William. They are saying she uses magic to make things grow." William looked at his mother with exhaustion. "She is not a witch. She is a botanist." "Botanist? A duchess does not botany. A duchess manages a household and produces heirs. Have you produced any heirs yet?" "No, of course not, because your wife is too busy playing in the mud to do her duty." William felt anger rising in his chest. Her duty? She has been nothing but dutiful. She has improved this house more in 2 weeks than we have in a decade. The dowager sniffed. "She is making you look ridiculous. The other dukes are laughing at you." "Let them laugh," William said, and he walked away from his mother for the first time in his life. Eleanor was in the conservatory when he found her. She was kneeling in the dirt, her hands covered in soil, her hair escaping from its careful pins. She was talking to a small fern, murmuring something about sunlight and water, and William found himself standing in the doorway, watching her. She was beautiful. He had always known that, in a distant, detached way. Her features were delicate, her eyes a warm hazel that seemed to change color in the light. But it was her hands, moving with such care and precision among the plants, that made his breath catch. She was not just beautiful, she was capable and intelligent, and so far beyond him that he felt like a fool. "I had not expected you to visit the conservatory," Eleanor said, not turning around. "I thought you disapproved of my dirt." "I do," William said, but his voice was strange, rough. Who are you, Eleanor?" She finally turned to look at him, and there was something in her eyes that made his heart clench. "I am the woman you married because you needed a wife, the woman you burned her dreams in the fireplace, the woman who has spent 3 years dreaming of something more than being a duchess." "I did not know," William said, and the words tasted like ash in his mouth. "You did not want to know," Eleanor replied. "You wanted a quiet wife who would not trouble you. You made that very clear on our wedding night." William did not sleep that night. He lay in his room, staring at the ceiling, replaying their conversation over and over in his mind. He had been cruel to her. He had been cold, dismissive, and utterly blind. He had married a woman of extraordinary talent and intelligence, and he had tried to bury her in the kitchen. But what was he supposed to do? He was the Duke of Ashworth. He had been raised to believe that women had their place, that wives were for producing heirs and managing households. He had never met a woman like Eleanor. He had never imagined a woman like Eleanor. The next morning, William made a decision. He went to the conservatory, where Eleanor was already working, and he said, "I will buy you a greenhouse, a proper one, with glass windows and heating for the winter. You can grow whatever you want." Eleanor looked up at him with surprise. "Why?" "Because you are good at it," William said, and for the first time in 10 years, he smiled. It was a small smile, barely a twitch of his lips, but Eleanor saw it. Her eyes widened, and then she laughed. Actually laughed. A sound so full of joy that William felt like he had been struck by lightning. "You smiled," she said. "You actually smiled." "I did not," William protested, but the smile was still there, and he could not seem to make it go away. "You did," Eleanor insisted. "And you are going to buy me a greenhouse. Are you feeling quite well, Your Grace? Have you been struck by a fever?" "I have been struck by you," William muttered, and then he turned and walked away before he could say anything else. But William did not stop there. 2 weeks later, the new greenhouse was delivered, a magnificent structure of glass and iron that took up half the back garden. Eleanor was speechless when she saw it. She walked through it like a woman in a dream, touching the windows, planning where she would plant everything. "The Royal Horticultural Society will be here next week," William said casually, watching her from the doorway. "I have invited them to see your work." Eleanor turned to stare at him. "You, what?" "I have also acquired a position for you," William continued, his voice carefully neutral. "A real position, with proper recognition. You will be the Society's official consultant for rare botanical species." They were rather enthusiastic about the idea when I mentioned my wife's work. Eleanor was crying. Tears were streaming down her face, and she did not try to wipe them away. "Why?" she asked. "Why are you doing this?" William walked toward her, and for the first time, he reached out and took her hands in his. Her hands were dirty, covered in soil, but he did not care. He brought them to his lips and kissed them. "Because I was wrong," he said. "I was so wrong, Eleanor. I married you for convenience, and I tried to put you in a box, but you were never meant to be in a box. You were meant to grow, to flourish, to be everything you could be, and I would rather watch you bloom in my gardens than wither in my house." Eleanor looked up at him, and there was something in her eyes that made his breath catch. "William," she said softly, the first time she had ever used his given name. "William, I think I might be falling in love with you." William pulled her into his arms, not caring about the dirt, not caring about the society, not caring about anything except the woman in his embrace. "Good," he said, and he was smiling again, a real smile this time, full of warmth and hope, and something that felt terrifyingly like love. "Because I think I have been in love with you since the moment you cooked me that duck." And in the greenhouse, surrounded by plants and possibilities, the Duke and Duchess of Ashworth stood together, learning that sometimes the most unexpected gardens bloom where you least expect them. But the story does not end there. The Duke's mother, the Dowager Duchess, was not pleased with this turn of events. She had her own plans for her son, plans that did not include a botanist wife who was gathering attention and praise from all of London society. "I have discovered something," the Dowager said, appearing in William's study with a letter in her hand. "Something about your precious wife's past." William looked up from his correspondence, his expression wary. "What is it, Mother?" The Dowager smiled, a cold, calculating smile. "It seems that your Eleanor is not quite as respectable as she appeared. I have learned that before her family fell into ruin, she was engaged to another man, a wealthy merchant from the north. The engagement was broken off when her family lost their money. He called it off, of course. Couldn't marry a poor girl." William felt ice form in his stomach. "That is not a secret. I knew she had been engaged before." "Did you know that she continued to correspond with him?" the Dowager asked sweetly. "Letters, my dear. Letters that I have acquired. Letters that suggest she still has feelings for the man who abandoned her." Eleanor was reading in the library when William stormed in. "Were you engaged before you married me?" he demanded. his face dark with fury. Eleanor looked up, confused. "You know I was. I told you before our wedding. Did you continue to write to him?" William's voice was shaking with rage. "Did you tell him you loved him while you were married to me?" Eleanor's face went white. "What are you talking about? I have not written to Henry in years." "Then explain this." William threw a letter at her, and Eleanor caught it with trembling hands. She read the words, and her blood ran cold. The letter was written in her handwriting, or a very convincing imitation, expressing love for a man named Henry Whitfield and regretting her marriage to the Duke of Ashworth. "I did not write this," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite her fear. "William, I did not write this. Someone is trying to destroy us." William laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "And who would do that? Who would want to destroy the perfect Duchess?" "Your mother," Eleanor said quietly. "She has always hated me. She made it very clear on our wedding day that I was not good enough for you." William did not want to believe it. His mother was a difficult woman, yes. She had always been cold and demanding. But forging letters? Trying to destroy his marriage? That seemed like something out of a melodrama. But when he confronted his mother, something in her expression made him pause. "I did what was necessary," the dowager said coolly. "That woman is unsuitable. She is a botanist, William. She talks to plants. She has the servants carrying cuttings through the house. People are laughing at us." "They are laughing because you are making us ridiculous," William said, and for the first time, he saw his mother clearly. "You have been trying to control me my entire life. You wanted me to marry someone you could manipulate, someone who would be grateful for the title. But Eleanor is not grateful. She is brilliant, and you cannot stand it." The dowager's face twisted with anger. "She is a fortune hunter who trapped you into marriage. She is a woman who deserved better than what I gave her," William said, and he walked away, leaving his mother to choke on her own bitterness. Eleanor was waiting in the greenhouse. She was not crying. She had spent too many years crying over things she could not control. Instead, she was working, her hands in the soil, her mind carefully blank. "Eleanor." She turned to find William standing in the doorway, his face pale and his eyes full of something she had never seen before. "I believed her," he said quietly. "For a moment, I believed her, and I am so sorry." Eleanor looked at him, and she felt the walls around her heart begin to crack. "You burned my letter," she said softly. "You destroyed my dreams. You told me my place was in the kitchen, and now you are telling me you are sorry?" William knelt in the dirt beside her, not caring that his trousers were being ruined, not caring about anything except the woman in front of him. "Let me grow something beautiful here," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Let me plant something in this greenhouse that will never wither. Let me love you, Eleanor. Let me spend the rest of my life proving that I am worthy of you." And in the greenhouse, surrounded by her plants, Eleanor finally let herself believe. "I cannot promise to be easy," she said, her voice trembling. "I will argue with you. I will drive you mad. I will talk to my plants and ignore your opinions." William laughed, and it was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. "I would not have you any other way," he said. "You made me laugh, Eleanor. You made me smile, and I have not smiled in 10 years. Eleanor reached out and touched his face, her soil-stained fingers tracing the lines of his jaw. Then we will grow something together, she said softly. Something that will never die. The forged letters were traced back to the Dowager's personal maid, who admitted to writing them under the Dowager's direction. The Dowager was sent to a quiet estate in the country, where she could plot her schemes without causing more damage. The Royal Horticultural Society published Eleanor's work, and she became one of the most respected botanical consultants in England. William bought her a second greenhouse, and then a third, and he spent hours watching her work, amazed by her dedication and skill. They had 3 children, all of whom inherited their mother's love of plants and their father's stubborn determination. And on the 10th anniversary of their marriage, William presented Eleanor with a small leather box containing a single seed. "It's from a plant that only grows in the Amazon," he said. "I thought you might like to try growing it." Eleanor looked at the seed, then at her husband, and she smiled. "You are the most surprising man I have ever known," she said. "I learned from the best," William replied, and he kissed her forehead. The Dowager lived out her years in comfortable exile, but she never forgave her son for choosing a botanist over her schemes. Some said she spent her days staring out the window, wondering where she had gone wrong. Others said she tried to send more forged letters, but the servants refused to cooperate. Eleanor forgave her mother-in-law, in the end, not because she deserved it, but because holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. She sent the Dowager cuttings from her greenhouse every spring, and the Dowager, though she never admitted it, began to grow her own gardens. The Duke of Ashworth was never quite the same man he had been before. He smiled more often. He laughed. He grew herbs in the kitchen garden and learned to cook, though his attempts were always met with gentle teasing from his wife. And the story spread through London society, becoming a legend in its own right. People whispered about the Duke, who burned his wife's dreams, and the Duchess, who taught him that love was not about control, but about letting each other grow. In the end, the Duke realized that he had married a woman who was far too wild to be tamed, and that was exactly what he loved most about her.